God before me, God behind me,
Thank you.
to the left and the right. God above me, God below me, all around and inside. Sing it like you mean it. God before me, God behind me, to the left and the right. God above me, God below me, all around and inside. Once more. God before me, God behind me, to the left and the right. God above me, God below me, all around and inside. Amen. So our discussion was pointing us towards prayer, wasn't it? And that's the next principle, is prayer. Now, many people who, when they present these principles, because Connie Fillmore first presented them in a different order. That's the way most people use it. They do thinking first and then prayer. But in my mind, and why I put prayer as the third principle, is that before I start thinking, I want to make sure I'm connected to the mind of God. I don't want to start thinking and then say, oh, I better connect to the mind of God. I want to do that first. So that's the order that I do them in. So if you see it in other websites or other publications, the 3 and 4 are usually reversed. But again, this is the way, this is as clear as I can be for myself in this process. Now, we use the example of electricity, about being connected. And one of the fun things about traveling is that in different countries they have different kinds of systems. And sometimes you need an adapter that'll plug in and give you something that you didn't have before. The one I was like, the ones in South America, we had ones that were in an angle, like that, so we had to use. Now the fun thing too is that in many other countries they use 220 or 240, and we use 110. And so you need a converter, and so this can plug into the wall. And the interesting thing about this converter will convert up to 50 watts from 220 to 110. This one will convert up to 1,000 watts. This one that converts up to 50 watts weighs about twice as much as the one to do 1,000 watts. So it's like, that's interesting because you think this one would need to be heavier duty. But for some reason it's not, and so that conversion is something that's interesting. When I used to travel, I used to carry this with me because it plugs in, and you can, again, depending on where you are, you can plug into 220. I've got a couple of adapters, and then you can plug. You got a 110 outlet. So you can convert from 110 to 220, 220 to 110. But this thing, I mean.
It's a brick, right?
And nowadays when they're charging you, if you get over a certain weight, so I don't carry that anymore. But when we think about that experience of God and who we are as a part of God, how do we get that that connection? How do we get the connection? And so we have to, in essence, translate or transform that into an experience that we can have for ourselves. And for me, this is what prayer is about, prayer meditation. And I use the phrase sometimes for myself, prayer conditioning. That I need to condition my mind with prayer in order for me to show up to do the things that I need to do in life. And so I have to make sure that I'm taking time for that. I can start my day without prayer. But when I start my day with prayer, it goes a whole lot better than when I don't. Now, it doesn't mean that things won't happen that are challenging or frustrating or whatever, but it means I'm prepared to deal with them in a different way when I start with prayer. And, just like you have to eat every day in order for your body to function. You can go a couple days, you can go 7 days without eating. But what's your experience of that? You don't have the energy, you don't have the focus to do things in a way that are helpful. So for me, it's the same thing with prayer. I don't need to pray every day. But if I don't, I'm not nourished. I'm not able to be present in a way that's as harmonious for myself and for others. And so when I take the time for daily prayer, I notice the difference.
Doesn't it have to do with what we were talking about, the subconscious mind being the powerful part? If you pray, you're planting that seed in your subconscious. So when something comes up in your conscious, your subconscious deals with it.
So let's look at this principle here. Prayer and meditation are our daily connections with God's loving presence through the Christ indwelling. So we take principle number 1, principle number 2, and the connection is prayer. In my mind, that's how this works. So, and I put in there, it's our daily connection. And I find that, that sometimes because of a schedule, that I got something, extra that's happening, or my day has to start early or something, my prayer time may not be as long as I usually would, but if at least I take some time, and then find some other time during the day where I can do that. I don't know how many of you ever took the training for transcendental meditation. The instruction that they gave was 20 minutes in the morning and 20 minutes in the afternoon or evening. That you'd have 2 times during the day where you devote 20 minutes each time to that. When I took a course years ago, it was designed by Werner Erhard, who developed EST training. And there were a group of ministers and priests back east that had asked him to develop a training for ministers and priests. And they called it Making a Difference for those who minister. And some of the priests were involved in what was called contemplative prayer. And although Werner Erhard did not build that into the program he designed, they added it to it. And we would start our day in the morning, first thing with 20 minutes of sitting in the silence, and end the day with 20 minutes sitting in the silence. And during this, it was a 4.5-day process that we went through. And during that, they really challenged us to make a commitment to daily meditation. And I had sort of been a meditator, but after that, I really committed to it. But one of the most interesting parts of that was that, I think it was on the 3rd day, after we'd been doing this for a number of days, we sat down, to sit in silence, and the words that they would use were, "Let your thoughts tend Godward." That was the instruction that they gave us for contemplative prayer. Let your thoughts tend Godward. So that in the middle of prayer, when you're thinking about, gee, was this trash day? Did I think the trash out? You just stop and let your thoughts tend Godward. So you just, wherever you find your thinking, you just start over, let your thoughts tend Godward. Well, during this particular session, after we've been practicing a couple days of this, as we're in the silence, all of a sudden I hear this noise. And one of the staff people was over at the window, and they had blinds, and he was rattling the blinds. And someone else who was on the staff had a piece of paper that they're wrestling through the piece of paper. And somebody else started tapping their fingers on something. And it's like, we're trying to meditate here. And then I realized that what they were really inviting us to do is to meditate even with things going on around us. And in those 4.5 days, that was my deepest meditation session, that one. Because after first being distracted by it, I was able to let it go and go even deeper. Because where in our modern world can you go to meditate and not have sound, not have noise? There's no place that you're going to go. And so if you let that distract you, it's going to distract you. At some point you have to say, that's it. When I came home from that session and I made my commitment, like I'm going to start my day with meditation, the next day I sit down, I'm out in the living room, and I realize I have to get up before the rest of the family if we're going to have any bit of quiet. Because our boys, I think, were 5 at the time, maybe 6. And so as soon as I sat down, took my breath, closed my eyes, the motor on the refrigerator started up. I thought, okay, I can do this. And I just thought, and I'd sort of struggle with in and out. And for the next 2 weeks, the moment I sat down to meditate, the refrigerator motor would start. Every day. Until I finally got to the point where I said, oh, the refrigerator motor. And I let it go. And once I was able to let it go, from then on, it didn't start up when I got to my meditation time.